Hi, Greg. Thanks for joining us on today's podcast. We've also got Josh on today's podcast with us as well. So thank you very much both for getting involved. First things first, just going to really quickly throw it over to Greg. And basically, Greg, where did it all begin? How did you get into weightlifting? How did it all start?
Oh man, long process. Early on as a kid, I was played every sport you can imagine, and a lot of the ones you've never heard of too, which were the ones that actually kind of appealed to me more in the long term, which of course leads to weightlifting naturally, since at least in the US, UK, and these sorts of places, it's not that interesting to everybody. So early on, I think what naturally attracted me more to some extent than the sports themselves was the training for those sports, right? That was kind of naturally what appealed to me. And so weightlifting in itself was sort of an obvious endpoint to that, because the sport is very similar to the training, right? There's not a lot of disconnect. So to me, it was a really natural evolution. And, unfortunately, as a young kid, I didn't have access to coaching or really know a lot about the sport itself. I had little bits of exposure to the snatch and clean and jerk through various, books, magazines, whatever, back in the olden days before the internet. 20 years later, of course, I found out that one of the most successful coaches in US history was 45 minutes north of where I grew up. But without the internet, it would have been impossible for me to know. There's no reason I would have picked up a telephone book for South San Francisco and looked up weightlifting gyms. There's no way that would ever occur to anybody. So, got serious about it a little later in life than I would have liked to, but that was the nature of the circumstances. And a lot of the reasons of how and why I am where I am now is just kind of a lot of good luck and meeting the right people at the right time, and kind of take advantage of those situations.
Awesome. I love it. And you say obviously like you didn't have access necessarily to coaches and stuff. So was it a case of trial and error? Or was it like did you eventually manage to find somebody to coach you and point you in the right direction?
It was a little bit of trial and a lot of error, for sure. And I learned, when I say learn, I taught myself the snatch and clean and jerk in rudimentary fashion in high school, 15, 16 years old, whatever it was. But my high school was actually a pretty large high school, but our weight room was this tiny little space in between two basketball courts and this main gym. And there was just nothing in there. There certainly weren't any platforms. I see these high school weight rooms now, and I'm like, this looks like, Division I collegiate / professional weight rooms. Like, where was this stuff when I was 16 years old? And I had some goofball, strength coach who was more of a bodybuilding kind of guy. And so it was a matter of kind of self-teaching those lifts with really limited resources and no way to get feedback. So for years, the snatch, clean, jerk were just kind of like bench press, deadlift, squat to me. It was another barbell lift. I wasn't quite sure how they fit into the rest of the world. And like I said, I didn't really understand the sport because it's not on TV. There was no internet. It's not like you go down to the drugstore and get a magazine on weightlifting. Strength and Health was long gone by the time I was that age. So yeah, it was waiting until I basically happened to run into Rob Wolf years later, who had just opened a CrossFit gym. Actually, it was the 4th affiliate. So he had helped open the original affiliate up in Seattle, Washington. They're the ones who actually gave the Glassmans the idea to have affiliate gyms. And then he relocated to Northern California, which is where I happened to be at the time. And I met him essentially through a neighbor. And I thought, well, this CrossFit stuff is kind of goofy, but you know, here's some space where there's, you know, open flooring, there's barbells that actually spin and bumper plates, which, you know, these days are somewhat ubiquitous thanks to CrossFit, which has been its great contribution to weightlifting, or one of. But back then, that was a really odd thing. You know, I was lifting on a concrete floor with iron plates in my garage. And prior to that, I had a power rack in the bedroom of my apartment. So it's like, you know, you're not snatching and clean and jerking and dropping weights in there on the second story of an apartment building that was already borderline condemned. So it really took meeting someone like Rob and finally getting this opportunity seemingly randomly to allow me to really pursue this thing that I had wanted to do for many years, but really just didn't have the opportunities and the wherewithal to take on.
Wow. Do you mind me asking that, obviously, because just to give a bit of context as well, how long ago was it that you met Rob and started weightlifting? So I want to say seriously, but you probably get my point.
I mean, this would have been like 2002 or 3, maybe.
Right. Okay.
Right, okay.
Somewhere right around there. So, you know, again, 6, 7, 8 years prior to that, I had known the lifts in a rudimentary fashion, but again, you know, I was treating them the same way as any other strength lift, essentially, not as parts of a sport, and certainly not doing them quite as well as I could have been and would do later. But, you know, knowing there was something to it, and I'm just not quite sure, you know, I know there's something here, but I don't know what exactly it is and how to find out. So just kind of spinning my wheels a little bit in that sense.
I suppose it's one of them as well, like sort of like 18, 17 years ago or so. And my coach tells me this all the time. Weightlifting wasn't as glamorous as it is nowadays.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, he talks about obviously going onto the stage and, like, you know, a buddy mankini, as he calls it. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. It's like, it's just not like that anymore, is it?
No.
But it's crazy to see obviously how much it has come on. And like you just said, then you have to ring someone to find a coach. Whereas nowadays, like, because of the internet and stuff, it's like it's so much more readily available, isn't it?
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, even compared to 10 years ago, even if you can't find a local coach, you can find a coach who will work remotely with you. You know, now that we can do everything by, you know, video, text, email, whatever. I mean, I train athletes around the world. I have, you know, 2 in England. I've got 1 in Denmark. I've got, you know, 1 in Canada. And it's no more difficult than coaching the ones I have just in the next state over, for example. Yeah. It's, you know, it's exactly the same. And beyond that, if you can't even find one of those coaches or afford them, I mean, you can get every piece of information you could possibly need online, either for free or for really low cost. Like, the accessibility is incredible.
Yeah.
And
which I think
where was that for me 20 years ago, you know?
Yeah. And I think that does bring us nicely onto Catalyst Athletic, because I know I was watching Catalyst Athletic videos before I even really was aware of you guys, because it was like I'd see something online, or I'd see a workout that I've got to do, and I'd be like, okay, well, what's that? And before I knew it, I'd find one of your videos. So obviously you've been probably a big part of making it accessible for everybody. Did that happen like organically? Did that just grow out of itself, or was it something that you just kind of you sort of set out to build a massive movement library and make it accessible?
I mean, organic is a nice way of putting it. Accidental is probably more accurate. And I mean, I say that somewhat facetiously, but I've never had like some grand master plan, and I've certainly never had what could be at all considered a business plan or any kind of long-term strategy. And I get people like, I want to do a consult with you, but my business, like, no, you don't. Because, you know, my business strategy is like, I'm going to try to make something that I think is good and just sit back and hope other people find it and are willing to give me money. I mean, I'm not joking. That is my business model.
That makes me feel better, because that's what we do. That makes me feel a lot better.
I mean, fortunately, it's worked really well for me. But, you know, again, there's so much of it was really I have to chalk a lot of it up to good fortune, because I happened again to meet the right people at the right time. I happened to have a bunch of seemingly unrelated skills and experiences that allowed me to do what I did. You know, I had a background in writing and editing and publishing. Because of that, I had taught myself, you know, web design and that sort of thing. And I had all these like weird things that just, I was able to bring together to create Catalyst Athletics at a time when there was this huge dearth of anything similar, right? There was nothing online. And so, I mean, I'd like to think that what I was doing was decent at the time, but honestly, it could have been almost anything, and it probably would have been somewhat successful because there was nothing else out there like it. So, you know, over time, of course, when I saw that it was successful and how much of a demand there was for it and how hungry people were for it, of course, then I started getting more serious about, okay, well, how can I provide the information and the tools to people who otherwise aren't able to get them? How can I make this most accessible? And that's why the vast majority of the stuff I put out is free and always has been. And you know, the premium stuff that I do is a tiny fraction of the content I make. And that's because I can't do any of this if I have to have a real job. So I have to actually be able to support myself with this stuff, or this stuff doesn't happen.
Yeah.
I'm not running Catalyst Athletics after a 50-hour work week. You know what I mean? Like, it's not going to happen.
No, I would definitely get that. So it sounds like a little bit of a perfect storm, right place, right time, and just
absolutely, yeah.
And
so again, don't use my business strategy.
But and we always joke about this because we have like I said, we started a podcast off the back of like, oh, coronavirus, let's see what happens with this, and like we're like, oh, we've got to do something with our time now because now we're not running the gym, and we've been really fortunate to have like awesome guests like yourself on, and like I say, it's kind of grown up from us not really knowing what we were doing to like receiving messages,
just rolling with it and seeing what happens.
Getting messages from people all over the world going, oh, I really like that. And I'm like, what? How?
Well, that's the best way to do it, in my opinion, is like you said earlier, trial and error is, hey, why not? Let's try this out. And then you find out what works and you keep doing that better and better. And you cut out the stuff that doesn't work. And then you have something that's valuable that people want. And it gives you guys something to do.
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah,
pretty much. So Josh sent me a question for you, and it prefaced with "lol." So we're gonna say that.
So basically, just before Phil asks it, I know how opinionated is not the right word, because you just basically believe in what you teach, which I think is unbelievable. So we just kind of want your opinion on something, and you can speak freely.
Yeah. And I can't wait. Okay,
we're not throwing you under the bus deliberately.
I would call it passionate.
Sure.
But so weightlifting in CrossFit was his exact with question marks followed. So what is your opinion on weightlifting in CrossFit? And by all means, like we're fans, we owned a CrossFit gym, I should say. And yeah, so go, guys. Tell us what you think about it.
I mean, honestly, I shouldn't say unknown reasons, because I can guess why, but I think people assume that I have like some sort of like ill will toward CrossFit or you know, whatever. And it's really not the case. And it's like anything else. There are great things and there are things that I disagree with, but like, I don't lose sleep over those things I disagree with. I don't really care that much. I care far less now than I did when I was actually directly involved with CrossFit, because at the time that was part of my livelihood directly. And it very, you know, what the community at large and what CrossFit Inc. were up to had a direct effect on me. And so therefore it was important for me to try to influence the direction of those things. And again, though, it was more about, hey, here's this thing that we're claiming to be incredible, so let's contribute to actually making it as incredible as possible, versus just kind of accepting the current state of things, which, you know, many years ago, I mean, I got out of CrossFit in 2008 or something, and by got out, I mean I was removed.
He wasn't the only one though, so I wouldn't.
Yeah, no,
I wouldn't take it personally.
Since then, things have changed radically in terms of how the CrossFit community at large views weightlifting, how they understand weightlifting, and how they incorporate weightlifting and appreciate weightlifting. And that's all I was trying to do way back then when it was, some big problem. I was the troublemaker, and now it's just common completely with the top CrossFitters. And so what it's gone from is being weightlifting was this thing that CrossFit borrowed certain tools from, but didn't bother trying to learn how to use those tools as well as possible, right? It's like your dad gives you a crescent wrench, and instead of turning nuts with it, you pound nails with it. It's like you have the tool, but you don't really know how to properly use it. And yeah, you're getting something done with it. You're pounding that nail, but you're kind of fucking up the wrench and the nail and the piece of wood the nail's going into, right? And maybe that's a little unfair of an analogy. It's not bad, but
I like it.
Now we have the recognition and nearly universal acceptance of the fact that, snatch, clean, and jerk and their related training have incredible value to offer to the CrossFitter, right? Someone whose only purpose is being better at CrossFit, not the sport of weightlifting, they're still going to benefit immensely from becoming as good at snatch and clean and jerk as possible. And there was this stubborn refusal to accept that years and years ago. And I could never understand it. And it drove me nuts, understandably. But you look at the top CrossFitters now in the CrossFit Games and any other context, all of them treat weightlifting as weightlifting, right? They train the snatch and the clean and jerk in sensible ways, in isolation as necessary, not just using the lifts within conditioning workouts or kind of real haphazardly. And that's why they're really good at them. I mean, Matt Frazier didn't learn weightlifting from CrossFit. He was a junior weightlifter at the Olympic Training Center years before he found CrossFit. So he came into it with that amazing foundation of weightlifting and was able to parlay that into being an incredible CrossFitter, right? So, and that's, I think we see that time and again, is that these greatest CrossFitters come to CrossFit with extensive athletic backgrounds in other things, right? Even though, the standard CrossFit trainer bio that we all like to joke about is like, I never did any exercise until 6 months ago. I found CrossFit and now I run a gym and I'm coaching you. And that's awesome in the sense that it's getting people into this amazing thing and helping others and giving them purpose and meaning. And I love that, no doubt. But that person does not become a world-class CrossFitter. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, now that CrossFit has accepted kind of universally that by actually focusing on these individual components, weightlifting, gymnastics, sprint work, these things, and giving them their due as individual activities to create this better whole as a CrossFitter, now that that's happening, we have much better CrossFitters, right? It's become the thing that we were saying it was 15 years ago, creating these athletes who are just absolute specimens. You know what I mean? Like people who are doing huge lifts, moving really well, also having, these totally unrelated abilities in terms of stamina and more gymnastics types of abilities and all these things. And that's all we were trying to accomplish back then, and getting shit on in the process.
I don't want to give Matt Fraser too much credit because obviously he gets enough as it is. I always think that the sport follows along from whoever's at the top at the time. And I think when Matt Fraser come onto the scene and everyone sort of saw how good his weightlifting was, they were like, even if we can get to 80% of that, then we're going to be in a much better place. And basically they went, shit, I need me some of that. And all of a sudden everyone's weightlifting got loads better in like a really short space of time. If that had been a runner on the top of the podium, who had really good, beautiful running technique, we might have found that like a similar thing happened the other way. But I think we're all fortunate in the sense that it was somebody who come from weightlifting. And
Absolutely.
And I suppose you could argue as well that the whole idea of CrossFit is that to be the best CrossFitter, you need to, in theory, be the best runner, the best at gymnastics, and the best at weightlifting. So you could also argue that, well, they should run like a runner, they should weightlift like a weightlifter, and obviously so on and so forth. So, but obviously you've only got so much training time, haven't you?
And that's the funny thing is that was one of the very original primary tenets of CrossFit philosophy. It was, you know, sprinting, gymnastics, weightlifting. Like those were the sources that created CrossFit. But then at the same time, there was this odd disdain for those specialist athletes, which, you know, there was this such weird, like philosophical discordance there. Like it didn't make any sense to me. And so, yeah. And even before Frazier, though, you look at Rich Froning, and yeah, he hadn't been a weightlifter. I believe he was a baseball player, but he took the weightlifting really seriously. And you're right, though, is that's what I think transformed the ideas in people's minds. Like, hey, we don't just have to do this haphazardly and treat it as an afterthought. Like we can actually set aside and dedicate time to developing these abilities individually to a higher level. And that will contribute to our ability in this combined activity, right?
Yeah.
Definitely.
It seems so simple and obvious now, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Hindsight's brilliant, isn't it? It's like,
well, and I think what's interesting as well is the amount of people that have actually gone from starting CrossFit and they've ditched CrossFit and moved to weightlifting, and actually got to a relatively high level, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think did Matty Rogers start in CrossFit?
Well, she had been a gymnast and I believe a competitive cheerleader,
right? Okay.
Which I think that's arguably her real athletic background. And then, she did get introduced to weightlifting through CrossFit, to my knowledge, with Danny Camargo. Okay. Although I don't know how long and how seriously she did CrossFit. I'm sure it was a couple years at least before the two of them recognized her talent for weightlifting and kind of started pushing in that direction. But yeah, I mean, there's no question that CrossFit has had an enormous and very positive influence on the sport of weightlifting. Yeah. Not in countries that already had weightlifting as a CrossFit isn't helping weightlifting in China or Russia. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the US, Canada, UK, Ireland, all these things, it's been an enormous help in not just generating interest, but of, like you said, finding talent, bringing talent in and exposing them to this sport, which then they understand, hey, I'm really good at this. This is actually enjoyable. I can pursue it, versus 15-year-old me who's like, I don't know what this is. I don't know how to do it or where to go. So I guess I'll just keep doing other stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And that kind of brings me nicely on to, like, if you was to have somebody who just walked through the door, brand new to you, like, what makes the, like I said perfect storm far too many times already today. But what makes that, like, somebody walks through the door, what is the perfect newcomer? Like, do they have a background in gymnastics, or do they have, are they completely fresh to weightlifting? What makes your eyes light up when somebody comes through the door?
I mean, first and foremost is kind of the attitude, the mental side of things. Is are they super enthusiastic and excited about pursuing this thing? That's number one. I don't really care what their athletic background and ability is if they're like lazy, obnoxious people that I can't stand being around, because then I'm going to kick them out anyway. But yes, athletic background. I mean, gymnastics is so huge. I mean, a gymnastics background is going to allow any athlete to pick up any other sport better than someone without that background. I mean, that's just like so obvious at this point, we can't deny it. But I mean, really any sport where there is an emphasis on strength, power, and control, and I think mental focus and fortitude. So gymnastics and throwing are the big ones. potentially sprinting, wrestling to some extent, although the strength component isn't necessarily there, so that can be a bit of a problem. But you know, the mindset, the aggression, the focus, and kind of like that single-mindedness of the wrestler is really well suited for weightlifting. And you know, things like that, they're all individual sports too, which helps. They're all individual sports, but you operate within a team, right? So like in wrestling, it's you and one other person on the mat, but you're part of a team. You know, you can win national championships, and you know, as a team, and you train as a team, and so those sports all share a lot of similarities to weightlifting. And so that's the kind of thing that excites me about a new lifter. Although I've been surprised. I mean, two of my best lifters have been softball players, you know, Jocelyn Forrest and Laura Alexander, which, you know, you don't normally associate the traits of those two sports, but you know, I don't know that they're good at weightlifting because of softball so much, or that they just happen to be good at both.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, the answer again, like just from the start, like attitude again, like that's something we talk about. I'd rather have somebody who comes in the gym and just loves to train and wants to know more about it than somebody who's like the perfect athlete. Like Captain America's just walked through my door and he can't be arsed, and doesn't help me, does it?
No,
so I love that answer.
Worth the misery.
It's not. Love it. So if you was to get, like, obviously you get a lot of questions, I would imagine, especially coming through. I think I think I read this somewhere that you've got, is it 70,000 people on your weightlifting program?
I think we're somewhere around like 78,000 people.
Okay.
Who have used the programs, and that's only since I implemented the login system a few years ago. So God knows how many more before that. But it's a good chunk.
Awesome. So you must get some ridiculous questions. And I just wanted to know what the most ridiculous ones are that make you just sort of head in hands. And
the ones that kill me and that I will never be able to understand are the ones related to programs. And it's not the question itself as much as when the question is asked. For example, week 4 of a training cycle, they'll ask what the exercise is, or they'll ask for an explanation of like the set and rep notation. It's like, hang on a second. You've been doing this program for a month and you still don't know what this thing is that you have purportedly been doing for that month. Like, how is it possible that we've gotten to this point? So that's the thing that just makes me want to smash my head against a brick wall. It's like, what is happening out there? How are these programs so successful when so many people are clearly not doing them properly? So that's the big one. That one, and the other one that gets me is anything that has to do with some alleged national or ethnic training technique, right? It's like, well, what about the Chinese method versus the Russian method versus the Bulgarian method? And it's like, just stop. Let's just talk about weightlifting. Let's look at the 99% of the things that are the same among these groups, instead of going off on these ridiculous journeys on the 1% that's slightly different. It's just such a classic internet symptom. Like, it just drives me.
But Liu Xiaojun squat jerks, so like, therefore we all should.
I had that. Okay, that's one that got me a couple months ago. Some guy, I posted a video of some of our team lifters training, and some guys comment, just, you know, totally unsolicited, no purpose. The split jerk is so inefficient. That's his whole comment. And normally I try to ignore, but I couldn't fucking resist. And I was like, oh, you know, please tell me more. And so he goes on and on about this. And, you know, at some point he says, and that's why the Chinese have pretty much abandoned it. And I was like, oh, hold on. And I wasted like an hour of my day going through videos of the most recent world championships and the most recent Asian championships, and actually counting how many of the Chinese national teams split jerked, power jerked, and squat jerked. and the split jerk was still like 70% of the team. And so it's like people have these crazy ideas in their head about what they're seeing that are not accurate at all. And so rather than coaches and various people being able to just teach and help people do things better, we end up wasting time like that, like just trying to convince them that the sky is blue before we can get on to anything else, you know? It's just so stupid. And of course, it's my own fault for wasting all my time looking at that shit, but I was just like, maybe I'm the stupid one. Like, I better double check before I go jump down this guy's throat. But thankfully, I was not the crazy one in that case.
I love it. So, coming off the back of that, obviously you say that 99% of things are the same. So if you could say to somebody, you've got maybe 3 things that you need to do, and I'm short of just saying snatch, clean, and jerk, what would you pick for the things that if somebody comes to you, very generic, they want to improve the weightlifting, where would you start with them?
It obviously starts with it depends.
Yeah,
but my favorite answer to everything.
It
depends.
That's our answer, to be fair.
I mean, do you mean like technically in terms of the lift execution, or just generally in all training?
So, you know, when you put your videos on Instagram with the corrections and stuff, which are absolutely brilliant, it's quite funny because sometimes when you're putting them on, it's like you can tell, it's like, look, you idiots, stop doing this. This is how you do it.
Please, let's stop talking about this here.
Stop hurting your pubic bone when you snatch. Do you know what I mean? Things like that. So yeah, so like just sort of like maybe 3 things that you could say, right, everybody will develop to a certain extent by doing X, Y, and Z.
I love that you just said Z, by the way, and not Z. But anyway, yeah.
I pulled Phil up on this the other day because he said Z. I'm like, you're not American.
Yeah. don't you dare use that letter. Shit, man. I think number 1 is a focus on balance over the feet, right? Learning through various pull and deadlift and lift variations how to feel pretty much even pressure across the entire foot throughout the lift, right? We have so many weird things as a product of misinterpreted, misunderstood, or misapplied cues like heels. Things like that, or that really confuse people because they don't understand why someone is necessarily saying that. And if I say heels to someone, it's because they're on their toes, not because I want them on their heels like they have peg legs. And so, learning to apply that to every single exercise they're doing, is going to pay off huge dividends. Learning how to properly brace the trunk, and how to pressurize with air and stabilize and create that rigidity consistently throughout a lift, and as part of that, understanding that if you're going for a neutral spine, that does not mean a straight line. I don't know, again, it's like I don't know where this stuff comes from originally, but then it just catches on. And it just like burns through the internet like a wildfire. And suddenly I have to tell people to quit tucking their butts under, looking like perverts, instead of just standing like normal human beings and tightening that position. So that's a big one. And that comes down to, doing your direct specific trunk strength work, back, abs, all that stuff, but then also actually taking it seriously when you're lifting anything, whether it's a pull, a snatch, or a clean, a jerk, a squat, a press, and making that second nature. I mean, this is the kind of thing that a kid in China learns on day 1, right? You get pulled off the farm into the gym, you learn how to brace your trunk. It's not like, a lot of lifters I deal with have been lifting for 5 years at the national level. They still don't know how to pressurize their trunk half the time. It's like, what is happening? Like, what kind of operation are we running here? And then number 3, man, I don't know. I guess maybe how to hold a bar overhead properly, because this is another thing that has gotten so convoluted and so unnecessarily confusing. And has been so influenced by like almost fashion and this quest for novelty by content makers, where it's like, well, this thing that everybody already does really well, it's not exciting enough for my Instagram video, so I'm going to make up some new weird thing that I never did in my weightlifting career all the way to the Olympics, but I'm going to teach you to do it now, and hopefully, you know, not blow your shoulder out, although it's guaranteed to happen. And so I guess those would be my three, without taking more time to really sit down and think about a better answer. But
could you expand on the third one with the overhead?
Yeah. I did that to myself.
You can't dangle the carrot like that.
So we have a couple different things to contend with, and that is, we have, I don't want to pick on anyone specifically, least of all CrossFit, because like I said, I really love CrossFit overall.
Go for it. So, as CrossFitters, you have our
understand that I'm picking on a very specific individual who evidently now is going to be no longer part of CrossFit, which is the best thing that could have happened to CrossFit, and that's Greg Glassman. He always taught shoulders in the ears for holding a bar overhead. You know, this like shrug up, which aesthetically looks great as a gymnast finishing a routine, but structurally does not work for holding heavy weights overhead. And it honestly couldn't be more obvious if you're holding a heavy weight overhead, right? There's no stability there. Your shoulder is this wonderfully mobile joint, but with that level of mobility comes potential instability. And so if we don't have those shoulder blades fixed tightly against the rib cage, creating a really solid foundation, doesn't matter how strong our arms are, how well our elbows are locked. It's like having a piece of steel bar in a bowl of Jello. You know, it's totally unstable. We need to have a piece of concrete with that steel rebar coming out of it, and that's what we do with our shoulder blades. Now, the newer version of this is this whole argument between external and internal rotation of the arms overhead. And it's just one of these things where it's like people ask me, well, is it supposed to be internal or external rotation? And like, those are the only choices I'm given. And I have to tell them, it's fucking neither. It's pretty much neutral in between the anatomical limitations of both, right? It's the same thing I've been teaching for 15 years. It's the same thing that you see 99% of elite weightlifters doing every time they hold a snatch overhead. It's clearly visible. And yet we have people still arguing about this and making videos and all this crazy stuff about which it's supposed to be. And it's like, just stop for a second and go to the Google machine, pull up the first 1,000 images of World Weightlifting Championship snatches, and just look at what's happening. It's all right there. Like, this isn't 20 years ago where we had to like guess or, you know, have some really difficult conversation with someone with a huge language barrier trying to understand this stuff. It's all right there in videos and images. So that's just frustrating as all hell. And I'm at the point now where it's like, I don't even know why I'm frustrated so much. Like, just do what you want to do. I'm going to make sure my athletes do what I know works best and is safest for them. And I'm going to do the same thing. And good luck with your shoulders and lifts. You know what I mean? It's not going to hurt me when your shoulder explodes or you're terrible at snatching. You know, that's your problem now. I did what I could, right? You can lead a horse to water, but you can't force it to drink the right way to hold a bar overhead.
I love it because everybody comes to everything in their own time, like you say. And I always actually remember the first point you made about balance across your feet. I remember the first weightlifting competition me and Josh were at. There was a guy shouting, "Feel your feet," and he was like very Bulgarian or something. And we're both kind of sniggering, going, "What's he on about? How do you feel your feet?" And now we're like, "Yeah."
Like, yeah,
that's what he was doing. There we go.
Yeah,
it's funny too. Is the more, and I think this is probably true for any discipline, is the more you learn about it, the more experience you gain, the more you start to recognize how critical and elegant simple concepts like that truly are. where, in the middle period of your development, you're looking for like the most insane, convoluted, unnecessarily complex approaches to things, because it just has to be complex, right? Otherwise it's not cool. It can't possibly be this simple. It can't possibly be as simple as just like having your whole foot against the floor. There's got to be more to it than that.
I love it. Excellent. Okay, so just I've got to be a bit more respectful of your time. I realise that we're going to run way over, but I could definitely I could ask you questions all day. So I just want to quickly move on to some recommendations and basically fun questions for you.
Sure.
So first one would be: have you got a book or film recommendation for everybody and anybody?
Yeah, first go to Amazon, type in Greg Everett, and buy every one of those books, and then you can start reading other books.
I like it.
No, in all seriousness, if you care about weightlifting, go get my book, Complete Guide for Athletes and Coaches. It will literally cover everything from step 0 to being an advanced athlete or coach. As far as other books, I don't know why I struggle with this question so much, because I read a ton of books and it's like I instantly go blank on names. But the one that really comes to mind right now, I just read pretty recently, is called Deep Survival by Lawrence Gonzalez. And it's not, I don't even know how to describe it necessarily. It's more about mindset and behavior and awareness that have more general application than to just actual literal survival situations. Right. But also has application to that. But it's just a really fascinating book. I mean, he ties in stuff from fighter pilots to mountain climbers to people being stranded on life rafts in the Atlantic Ocean for 76 days, like, just every possible contingency you can imagine. And then, brings in sources from a huge variety of perspectives in terms of psychology and scientific concepts that you wouldn't normally even associate, like what causes accidents, like just really remarkably interesting stuff like that. So that was one of those books. So much of the time I'm disappointed with books for one reason or another, but that one, that I liked it the whole time. Right. You know what I mean? And that one, and then I guess the other one would be a book called Violence of Mind by Varg Freeborn. That is a book. I cannot remember doing this with another book. I read that cover to cover 2 times in a row immediately. Like, finished it the next day, went back to page 1. And so it's largely like a self-defense sort of book, but it's describing it as such really like doesn't give it enough credit. Like, it should be mandatory reading for every person, especially every guy, every like self-styled tough guy in particular. And it's a really good one. So those 2 would be at the top of my list right now. Ask me tomorrow, maybe I'll have another one, but those 2 will still be on the list for sure.
Awesome.
Your book, The Complete Guide, was the first book I read in terms of weightlifting when I started. And obviously it's about this thick, isn't it? Yeah. And I finished it. I read it cover to cover and I had no idea what was going on. I was like, I'm not good enough to read this yet. And then recently I have actually revisited it. And obviously now I know a bit more about what I'm talking about. It's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, it's tough, right? And I did my best, especially in the latest edition, to provide like more bullet point summaries on these more complex things, so someone that doesn't have the background can actually better understand and implement that stuff at whatever level they're at. And then, like you said, kind of go back later with the framework of that experience and understand those details.
It's like that going balancing full circle that you were talking. Yeah. Like, at first you don't know what you're talking about, you come back to it, it's like, oh, okay, these simple principles now do make sense. Yeah.
I've done that with loads of books where you start off and you like, and I've read them cover to cover, like you say, and then gone, I got no idea what I've just read. And then I've come back, I come back to it 2 years later, and I'm like, oh, how could I not understand that concept? Like,
yeah, absolutely. there's books that I hated the first time through, and I came back and read them years later, and I was like, what was my problem before? This was a great book. Like, I just must have just been an idiot at the time. So yeah, absolutely. If the books you hate sometimes deserve a second chance, especially if they're by me.
Brilliant. Okay, so next question would be, obviously you're in and around the gym all the time. What are your top dick gym moves? So things that people do that just wind you up. And my go-to example is always people chalking up the hands to do press ups. I'm like, why are you making my blood?
Perfect. Now we just need to mop more.
Yeah, exactly.
I think a big one is just having a total lack of respect for the facility and the equipment. It's such a symptom of that sense of entitlement people have. Just throwing equipment around, not putting stuff away, clearly having absolutely no concern for the maintenance of that equipment, or the fact that someone like me has to pay for it and fix the shit that they break. That probably chaps my ass more than anything. Just because it's just so disrespectful and it's so unnecessary. Like, it's so easy to put something back. You learn that in kindergarten, right? Like, that's day one in kindergarten is, hey, you got your stuff out, go put it back now that you're finished. And then we have adults who can't be bothered to like turn a light off or put a plate away. God, sorry to have such ridiculous requests of your time. And then I think another one would be not, how do I even describe this? Just people's attitude in the gym and the way that they are not aware of how their behavior and attitude potentially influences other people, right? And just having that piss poor attitude and complaining and whining about everything, and oh, I'm so tired and everything hurts and this is so hard. Meanwhile, 2 other lifters are working their asses off, and they're probably tired and hurting too, but they're getting their damn work done. And the last thing they want to hear is reminders of how shitty someone else's day is, right? It's just such a selfish, childish thing to do, to like burden other people with your private problems, when it's not something those people really can even help you with anyway. Like, it's one thing to be like, hey teammate, I could really use a pep talk right now. I'm down. My girlfriend just left me last night, and my knee is hurting. Like, I just need a few inspirational words. That's not complaining and shitting on somebody. But when it's that, like, there's always that one person in a gym who walks in and the rain cloud just follows them. And everyone before that is all happy and talking, having a good time. And all of a sudden you can see the whole gym just like shut down. And it's like, we've got to get rid of this person. So that sort of thing is, and being either so unaware of that effect that you have and your bad attitude, or not caring, like thinking that everyone else owes it to you to like just deal with your bad attitude and fix you, instead of you actually like taking some responsibility for it. I'd say those are the 2 at the top of my list. And not surprisingly, those 2 things usually go together in the same person.
Yeah. And if you don't think your gym has one, it's you.
Yeah, exactly.
I was going to say, to be fair, we're British, so moaning's like ingrained in our culture. So we always it. But
it's different.
Like
it's the stiff upper lip sort of thing, where it's like, it's not, you don't, the stereotypical British like moaning and complaining is not really complaining in my experience.
It's more poking fun, I think. I've always found.
Yeah. And we're always fine. Fine.
Yeah. Because I mean, I'll talk about how something is terrible for a while, but I'm not actually that upset about it. I'm still going to like handle my business. You know what I mean? It's like, fuck, here we go. Day 6 in the salt mine this week, but that kind of shitty, but I'm going to go and do my work. You know what I mean? And go home and have a few pints and be done with it and go back for the 7th day. Right.
Exactly.
And so that to me is more what I see from my limited experience being American, but
no, I agree.
Americans are actually just whining and wanting someone else to fix the problem. That's different.
I love it. Okay, so last question. If you could try another profession, any profession you want, what would it be? I say a load of guitars, so
oh man.
Yeah.
I don't know, honestly. There's been lots of things that have crossed my mind over the years, but I think something like being a pilot, and not a commercial pilot. My grandfather was a pilot, and what he told me was never be a pilot as a profession because it will absolutely ruin your love for it. He was one of the original pilots who created airmail. And this, he had like 2 of his roommates die in plane crashes. Like, this is back in the old days. There wasn't any navigational equipment. They were like just winging it, so to speak. And so being a pilot, like a fighter pilot or a helicopter pilot or something like that, which I can't actually do because I'm partially colorblind.
Right.
So like,
yes,
you can't.
Greg.
You
yes,
can't,
me too, bro.
I was going to say all the best weightlifters are, but I don't want to give Josh that much credit.
even in the military, they won't even take you for those schools because of that. Like, you have to be able to recognize, especially red, green, right? Green means go, red means stop. Like, if you can't easily distinguish those things, you're in big fucking trouble in those situations and probably going to kill a bunch of people. So I don't know, something like that. That is, really high pressure, really demanding of focus and skill and kind of that composure and fluidity that is very, very hard to attain. And whether or not I'd be capable of doing it well is another question, but that wasn't the question you asked. So we'll pretend that.
That's cool. And I know I said that was the last question, but I've been admiring. I've always got a lot of admiration for anyone that can play music. And I notice a lot of you've got guitars on the background. Can you actually play them, or do they just look pretty?
I can, but not as well as I used to, because I used to play really regularly for many years, and I haven't now for many years. So I can still play to some extent, although like the stamina in my fingers is garbage. I'll play one song and I'll be over there crying about my cramping hand. So not as well as I used to, and I always tell myself I'm going to play again, but
I'm a big fan of that green guitar as well.
Josh says green, it's blue. Don't worry, guys. But we
the
can
other
tell
ones are
Josh
black, thankfully.
We sometimes tell Josh just random colours just because it's more fun that way.
I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I can snatch 4 reds. So,
yeah, there you go. I had one of my lifters, Lily, is like just like the sweetest kid ever, and she found out I was kind of colorblind, and I'm not even completely colorblind. I can still see certain reds and greens, but like certain shades I cannot tell. Like, my wife been laughing at me for years because at one point I was like, why in the fuck did you buy a green blanket for our bed? She's like, it's not green, it's gray. I would never buy a green blanket. So not only do I not see it, I'll like assume certain things are certain colors because of the shade of gray or brown or blue or whatever they are. But she found out, and so she was so upset by it. It was like I was incapable of experiencing this like critical thing. And she starts looking it up on the internet and finding these examples, like, this is what a colorblind person sees versus what you see. And she was like practically in tears. She's like, this is what you go through life like? Yeah, it's not that big of a deal. Like, I still have, all my arms and legs and like, all this stuff. But it was like the funniest thing, like how upsetting it was to her. But yeah, we're doing okay.
It's not the worst thing. I mean, my wife has to dress me because apparently I wear the wrong colour, but it's not the end of the world, is it?
No, I don't really, wear colors anyway, so it's fine.
When we were painting the gym and it was black and white, I was just like, I'll never forget the moment when I found out that Josh had picked the colours, and I was like, yeah. I know what this is before I even look. I'm like, this is
can't go wrong with black and white and shades in between. They all go together.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, brilliant. So I'm going to fire through the last couple of questions again because, like I say, I want to.
No problem.
I don't want to keep you on too long. So it's basically this or that. You choose like your favorite of the bunch. So example being snatch or clean and jerk. Which do you prefer?
Snatch for sure, because there's no jerk in it.
Brilliant. Front squat.
If I could choose clean, I would choose clean.
That comes up more often than you think, like, people are just like, yeah, clean, only clean. Front squat or back squat?
For reps, back squat. For weight, front squat.
Okay, nice.
I know I'm taking your binary yes/no questions.
No,
and totally them up.
This is effectively what we
Don't
want.
put me in a box, man.
I was up to, sorry. Running or rowing?
Oh, probably rowing.
Nice. I like it, my man. Pizza or ice cream?
Oh, pizza. That's not even a question.
Cookies or donuts?
Donuts.
Books or movies?
I would have to go with books.
Nice, I like it.
Even though I really do love movies, but
I'm the same. I like to get into a good book, but then like it can't be a couple of hours with an awesome film.
Yeah.
Last but not least, Olympic gold medal or £1 million?
I would probably go with Olympic gold medal.
Nice.
I could always sell it on eBay if I needed to.
Awesome.
Olympic gold medal is the correct answer.
And don't. I wasn't taking time to think about which I wanted. It was more if I could come up with actually a clever response, and clearly I couldn't. So
I'm always surprised when someone says £1 million, and I don't know whether I should be. I'm like, when someone says £1 million, I'm like, really? You don't want to.
Disappointing.
I'm like, you don't want to win.
Interview is over.
That's why we save the question till the last. Normally, if they say £1 million, I'm like, all right, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I mean, if you have an Olympic gold medal, you can still go try to get a job or start a business and make £1 million.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we say. Awesome. So, Greg, thank you very much for joining us today. It's been great fun. I definitely have loads more questions for you, so hopefully we can do this again another time.
Absolutely.
Where do people find you if they want to give you a follow or find one of your programs?
CatalystAthletics.com is the portal to everything I do. You can get all the free stuff there. You can get all the paid stuff there. And as far as social media goes, Instagram is pretty much the only thing I'm really active on. Facebook is garbage, and Twitter is basically just where I go and read about politics and get pissed off all day long. So I don't actually post anything. I just like stuff like fuck. So yeah, the CatalystAthletics.com and Instagram user is Catalyst Athletics. Everything else you can find from there.
Excellent. Again, Greg, thanks very much for joining us today. For everybody listening, thank you very much for giving us a listen. And don't forget, like, subscribe, share, review, give us a 5-star review on iTunes if possible. And also, if you're on YouTube, like and subscribe. It really does us a big favor. And thank you very much, guys.